So I would like to welcome Dr. Mariana Carroll. Dr. Carroll is working with Mariana Carroll Consulting in South Africa and was with us in a prior webinar earlier this year talking about cloud security. And this time we're actually very proud to have Mariana Carroll Consulting as a partner of the CCC, looking at the cloud skills and capability gap in the African region, which is also our first regional webinar. And yeah, it's a very exciting prospect to see how things are developing on a regional level as well. And before we start, we just want to gauge your experience with cloud and see that your questions are answered in today's session. So if you would take a moment to answer this poll, how would you rate your cloud experience? Okay, it looks like we have about 75% of the audience voted. I'll give it a couple of more seconds. And that's it. So I'll share that so everybody can see what we have here. So it looks like about 30% work with cloud technologies. Others, majority know a bit about it but need to know more. And those that are new to cloud and also want to learn more. Now, what I'm going to do is ask you to start sending in your questions through the chat box, and I will monitor it as we go. And we will make some time at the end to answer it. And if it's very relevant to what Mariana is discussing, I will try and interrupt to the best of my ability and get your question in for you. And one other poll just to see also how far into your cloud use you are, because we did have quite a few saying you know cloud, you need to know more. So where in your cloud journey are you at the moment? Okay, it looks like everyone's taking a bit more time to think about their answers. I'll give it a few more seconds. All right, closing now. So I guess everyone can see the same answers. Full steam ahead, 30%, I like that. And early stages of investigation for the majority. And it's curious to know also at what level you're investigating. So is this an enterprise rollout you're looking at, or adopting some key software or platform applications and services? Okay. So I think with the different regional approach we've taken with this webinar, some of you might be new to the Cloud Credential Council, so I'll do a quick introduction. The Cloud Credential Council was established in 2012. We started out with it's a nonprofit member-based organization. So we have a network of partners, both leaders in IT best practices, as well as cloud technology vendors and technologists, as well as the early adopters, the leaders in the cloud industry using cloud. And what we did is we looked at what is the cloud adoption cycle and what are the key areas that we can focus on collectively to be able to really accelerate adoption of cloud to make it more successful, because yeah, not very surprising, but many are failing hard and fast. And this is what we came up with is the CCC Cloud Certification Program, in that it takes into account the various stages of adoption. So whether you're looking at strategy, design, development, transitioning the technology infrastructure, operating it, and also the continuous improvement that organizations and professionals want to gain by leveraging cloud solutions, the different roles that are required at each of these stages, and understanding what level of skills and competence they need to really be effective in driving the cloud adoption within the organization. And from that, we designed the cloud certification program, which is vendor neutral, it is role based, and it's also compatible with existing IT best practices, as well as all the different cloud technology vendors you'll find in the market. And what does this mean? It means if you are in business, if you're a line of business manager or user, you can do an associate level cloud technology associate or big data foundation, get an understanding of what is cloud, what is this technology, and things like big data, where it is very important with all the data going on in the world. We create a lot more data to be able to really assess it and use it in the organizational context. And then at the professional level, you have the key roles for adopting cloud. So the administrator, the developer, the security manager, the service manager, and the all talked about solutions architect. And as you can see on the graphic to the right, these certifications, these roles are very much aligned with, the cloud technology vendors such as AWS and others as well, which you can see on the CCC website. Now, before we start with Mariana's session, I do have a couple of more polls, but I'm going to ask you to also use your memory a little bit here because I wasn't able to fit all the options you have for the answers. So if you're looking at your cloud adoption, what business drivers are most important to you? Cost reduction, business growth, customer experience, productivity and efficiency, agility, mobility and automation of processes, or innovation. And you will see when I run the poll, option F and G are not available. If you can type them into the chat box, I'll tally it very quickly to the best of my ability. Okay, we got a good fast pickup there. Okay, so I'm gonna quit the poll. If you're answering, you have 1 or 2 seconds. Okay. So I think, I've shared the results. Everyone can see the majority are looking at customer experience, followed closely with productivity, efficiency, and cost reduction, which is understandable, but yeah, very different approaches. And I will hide the poll so we can see there were a couple of other people who also added option C in there via chat. And we do have one more poll also to ask what organizational factors you're trying to improve the most. So first you're looking at what you're trying to achieve, and now within the organization, what is the impact you expect? Is it the intelligence, the adaptability, engagement, innovation, collaboration? And in case you forgot, the last two were efficiency and productivity. So you can always chat into me with option E, efficiency, and option G, productivity. Giving it a bit more time. It looks like this one is making everybody think a little. Okay, we're almost there. I'm gonna have to close it now, so please chat in if you missed your turn. Okay, so it looks like a lot of people want to adapt and engage and collaborate. I did not get anyone chatting in, so could it be nobody's looking at efficiency and productivity as the main drivers? Okay. So I will now hand it over to Mariana. Mariana, I'm going to check that you're able to take over the keyboard and that we can hear you. If you could say hi.
Hi, Marian. It's so great to be on here, and thank you so much for the introduction.
Okay, so thank you for being here, Mariana. And before we begin, I wanted to ask if you could briefly introduce yourself as well. I cannot do justice, so I'll let you do that.
Okay, so while we test the controls, I think firstly It is such an incredible honor to just spend some time with each one of you that's on this webinar. And Marion and the Cloud Credential Council, thank you so very much for hosting this webinar. I really value our partnership highly. And yeah, I'm just really grateful and absolutely delighted for each one of you that is on this call today. I know this time of the year is actually crazy busy, and we are all running at 120 kilometers per hour. I mean, as I sit here, I cannot believe we're already in December. But as they say, time flies when you're having fun, right? So yeah, what an incredible year I think this has been. So yeah, maybe just in terms of quick introductions. So I've been in the technology space for more than about 12 years. I've used to work for big corporates. I've been fortunate to actually move around between the auditing space, so seeing the governance and risk angle of things, but also to be on the other side of the consulting and advisory space. I'm really passionate about training and education, and I think a little bit of an academic at heart. And I'm very fortunate to now have my own consultancy company. We really focus around enabling and equipping people in the IT world, and just help you to make informed decisions and to really come alongside equipping you through tools and assessments and training, for instance, and that's where the training portfolio also fits in, and this partnership with the Cloud Credential Council, and then to also just support and advise where needs be around some of the key emerging technologies. So we're really playing in the emerging technology space, and what an absolute, I think, just honor to be part of all of this. So I think at this point, let me just quickly see if I can, yes, I can move over to the next slide. So maybe if we just step back and just take a few seconds just to briefly think about what happened during this year. I think our current reality is so volatile and sometimes so uncertain, definitely I think extremely complex and actually quite ambiguous, where the rate of change is speeding up by the minute, where predictability is lacking in the age of convergence. We see this generational shift of new ways of working that is at the order of the day, and we need to deal with things like automation, mobility, globalization, and I think so the list goes on and on and on. It's sometimes really, really hard to keep up and to actually position ourselves to take advantage of this amazing change that's actually happening around us. I think there's so many opportunities surrounding us, and we really need to sometimes just sit back and reflect on, do we really develop adaptive mindsets? Do we really understand our vision and our strategies? Do we really embrace an abundance mindset? Do we embrace actually living in this connected world where we have agile learning and where we can really differentiate ourselves, I think, through value delivery? It's definitely, I think, some of the best of times to actually live in, although there are a lot of change and a lot of challenges that is surrounding us. So if we just look briefly at the role of the IT organization and how it's progressing and how we actually see this change happening, I think the primary role of IT has always been to support business operations. And if we allow ourselves to just go back in time, just a few years back, we see a story unfold where the business had a very specific problem they needed to solve, or they had like a specific requirement that they needed to be met. So because most business execs at that point of time, I think, was not necessarily highly technical or tech savvy, they would then contact the IT director and would ask for advice on whether some technology solution would be able to deal with their specific problem or that would actually address their specific need. And so after work, the IT director would go researching some solutions, and then he or she would come back based on some parameters like functionality and cost and capability and propose a solution to the business. Then the whole procurement process would start, and fast forwarding a few months, and you would have a technology solution that typically at that time would already be outdated, as we sit with the challenge of problems and needs growing faster than our development and implementation cycles. And so the process would start all over again. I think the key emphasis in this actual scenario is on support of operations. And that's typically what the role of the IT organization was, is to support the operations, the daily operations of the business, which was characterized by manual processes and typically underutilized resources. IT was seen as a cost center with little value, and sometimes even referred to as a hindrance to the business. Rolling forward to today, I think we see a digital marketplace where technology is key to ensuring agility, efficiency, effectiveness, better performance, and so the list goes on. It's a landscape where IT has moved beyond just the enablement function to one that actually permits growth and introducing new ways of working, truly becoming that value-adding partner that everyone is talking about to the business, or that at least is what most IT execs aspire to. With business users being more educated and proficient in technology and using smart apps in their daily personal lives, I think the demand for efficiencies, mobility, artificial intelligence, automation, and innovation are growing at a staggering rate. I mean, even looking back at your poll answers, I think that also just highlight the fact. The IT executive and their team is truly, I think, at a crossroad where they can either choose to change with the times and stay relevant in this digital age, or choose to not respond, but I think soon find themselves to be redundant. The change from being, I think, very operationally focused to be more strategic, this true value-adding partner, is not an overnight switch that you can just turn on. It's truly a journey of transformation, and I think earmarked not only by being more agile and agile delivery or cloud-based solutions, but also by an IT team structure where talent and capabilities are of utmost importance. The saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, comes to mind. I think the entire IT team's delivery is influenced by the ability and the skill of the weakest member. Sometimes actions does speak louder than words. I think the ability to learn new skills may become as important as one's existing knowledge base. Perhaps one of the greatest challenges and the concerns in this changing world from IT operations to a value-driven business partner is the people and the team aspect. I think the scarcity of technical talent is a significant concern across many industries, and especially evident in the African continent. The legacy skilled workforce is nearing retirement. The education system is not always up to scratch, and job hopping is at the order of the day. This is all contributing to a massive skills gap, I think, especially when it comes to latest technology, latest emerging technologies like cloud computing, for instance. Ali Bidwell stated in a US News and World Report that by 2020, retiring baby boomers are expected to leave 31 million positions open. Forrester Research expects by 2018 that crowdsourcing will constitute 20% of all enterprise application development sourcing. That is borne out by predictions reported in the Accenture Technology Vision 2016 report that in the US alone, 43% of the workforce, that is nearly 60 million people, will be freelance by 2020. That number is roughly 4 times more than in 2015. Career Junction also states, the world keeps changing and so does the employment market. On Career Junction, the IT industry has seen significant growth in job postings of nearly 30% comparing to current demand levels and vacancy levels and that was during the first half of 2016. I think there's a significant online demand indicating the positive employment trends that's happening, all the while we see the actual gap of skills and capabilities, especially for emerging technologies, growing at a staggering rate. So by considering the changing role of IT and this inherent gap that is widening from a skills and capabilities perspective, I think there's a number of key questions that we should actually consider, especially if you want to stay relevant and on top of this ever-changing game. So how will you navigate this ever-changing, volatile, sometimes quite uncertain, complex and ambiguous business expectation? How will you actually adapt to creating a lasting business value? What needs to change in terms of your strategy? And how will you ensure adequate alignment between business needs and IT delivery? Who will you bring along on this journey? Who do you currently have? Do they have the right skills? Have you considered the skills and talent requirements for your current IT organization or your team? And have you considered it for 5 years from now? What is this gap? And how do you anticipate of addressing this gap? I think in an attempt to answer these questions, let's firstly look at some of the key strategic and resource challenges that African businesses are facing today. That will set the frame for us for looking at the business expectation and also the definition of what a successful IT organization of the future looks like, which will then lead us to a discussion around how a business-aligned cloud strategy and roadmap can actually assist in reducing these challenges and creating that value-adding business technology partnership. And then we'll lastly be looking at addressing the people question. Who are we bringing along on this journey, and how do we close this skills and capabilities gap that is hindering our progression towards success? So let's start by looking at the strategic and resource challenges faced currently by African businesses. I've been very privileged over the last 20 months to be hosting CIOs from large South African corporations spanning about 7 industries at the Deloitte CIO Transition Labs. So the CIO Transition Labs forms part of a global initiative called the Deloitte Executive Institute that focuses on equipping leaders toward a successful transitioning period, especially when they step up into a new executive role. And based on extensive research, the whole lab experience is basically based on 3 key areas. The one thing is, how do you actually manage your time? The second is, how do you manage your talent? So do you understand the team structure and the capabilities that you have within your team? And then lastly, relationships. So do you have the right buy-in and support from key people in your organization? So as part of this process, I get to interview between 5 and 10 executive board members for each one of the CIOs that actually participate in these labs. And some of the key questions that we actually ask them is to understand their IT-related frustrations and to also get an understanding of their expectation of the role of the CIO and their team in the organization. So from these interviews, which is now almost topping like 115 over the last 20 months, we group some of the expectations and some of the key challenges that's highlighted by these execs into 3 categories. And as you can see on the presentation, the first one is strategic partnerships, the second one, operational excellence, and then the third one, tactical agility. So if we think about strategic partnerships, we see that developing that trusted business relationship and truly getting to a place where IT and business are aligned is still a massive challenge in many organizations. Also, this whole thing around value contribution. So changing the perception that the business have of IT just being a PC shop or just a service provider to really being a strategic enabler of the business. If we move on to operational excellence, some of the key challenges that's currently experienced is around balancing the supply and demand of IT resources. We hear so many times that it's said that there's just too many priorities, too many projects, and the IT department is just under-resourced. And we see operational issues actually always taking preference over delivering times when it comes to project completion. There's also a lack of governance, risk, and compliance controls. I think still, even though there's a lot of emphasis around these areas, and then just balancing operational challenges while being strategic and innovative. So how do you split your time, keeping the lights burning while actually focusing on introducing new innovative ways of doing things in the business? There's still way too many manual processes that we seen across all these industries, and then we are still struggling with budget constraints and just balancing this demand of improving capacity and achieving optimal cost efficiencies. Moving on to the third leg, tactical agility, and that's all around IT team capabilities and the future state of the IT team structure. So the actual ability to attract, to retain, and to actually just motivate your talent and develop a succession plan, getting the right people and the right team and with the right skills in your IT organization. And we see many of the organizations really struggling to get this whole matrix actually right. And then also another thing is this whole thing around the team culture. Because we are bombarded by all these changes, it's really difficult to keep a team culture of excellence, to foster innovation, and to really empower the people in the team. And then we just see change management really becoming a constraint, where this culture of resistance to change is still very evident in African organizations. There's definitely a conflict between being an agent of change in this digital transformational journey and the readiness of the business to actually accept and adopt the new ways of working. So this picture again just highlights what we said during the introduction. IT is expected to be this value-adding business partner rather than just a cost center. There's this changing role of IT, but there's also this gap that's actually starting to happen. And I think that's where all the frustration and the challenges also comes from. Because of the large dependency on IT capability and this growing skills gap, the IT exec and their team's ability to drive value to the business is actually at stake. Linking to this, Deloitte recently published the 2016-2017 Global CIO Survey, and there were actually like 1,217 participants over 48 countries that participated in this survey. And from the survey, we still see the customer is ultimately king. Delivering value and services to the customer, being customer-centric, is ultimately a key business priority. This is followed strongly by the drive of growth, enhanced performance, cost efficiencies, and also innovation. And I think this is very much aligned, again, to what we've seen during the poll answers that we just ran. This picture is supported by our CIO lab findings as well, where during some of our interviews with these execs, we actually asked them what are some of their general perspectives and expectations of the role of the IT team. And we see 5 key areas emerging. The one being a technology thought leader and a change agent. That is an absolute expectation where the business actually expect the IT execs and the team to really bring new ways of working to the forefront, to really paint the picture in terms of the art of the possible, for IT to really be seen as this value add and change agent, where they introduce automation, operations, and mobile solutions to all drive efficiencies and to really enable business initiatives. I need to actually apologize to you. I see there's funny colors on the slides. It used to be white and black, but I think that just crept in somewhere along the lines. But regardless of that, I think secondly, we see this key expectation of IT to ensure adequate business alignment. I mean, as we've seen in some of our previous discussions as well, this includes really understanding the goals and the strategy, and then actualizing the business requirements into a fit-for-purpose, affordable solution. Technology should be the enabler of the business, providing a strategic direction and insights for this entire transformation journey. I think in many instances, we see that IT is truly the lifeblood of the business, and they should therefore be actually deeply integrated into some of the key business initiatives, where they truly enable the business to create that competitive advantage. And then if we go back to some of the stats, to be more customer centric and to ultimately provide better customer solutions. Thirdly, we see there's an expectation for IT to introduce new ways of working and thereby actually creating better efficiencies. Innovation and strategic foresight is needed to assist the business with this transformation journey. Then the fourth expectation is around IT operational excellence, and we've spoken a little bit about it, but it's really ensuring that there's a balance between the IT spend, planning, building capacity, demand management, and the running of the daily operations. It's all around driving cost efficiency, stabilizing the IT environment, the ability to actually execute, adhering to governance and risk management standards, standardizing data and reporting, enabling the business to really provide service excellence through technology enablement, better performance, priorities, really being focused around that value-adding solutions, consistency. We also see this big need for agility, simplification, this whole conundrum around integration, where we sit with complex and hybrid solutions, and then also lastly, a big and I think foundational key area around legacy decommissioning. And then the fifth expectation, and very importantly, and I think linking back to this whole thread of this discussion, is talent management. So defining an IT organizational structure that is aligned to business strategies and ensuring relevant competencies are provided for and staff development and motivational plans are in place. So it's important not to really only focus on our current and traditional skills and our current team and the current structures that we have, but also considering the changing role of IT and addressing this growing skills gap surrounding emerging technologies. So probably my favorite question during these key stakeholder interviews where we interview the execs is towards the end. And that is when I usually ask them, so if we have this exact same conversation a year from now, how would you define success for your IT team? And moving along our key themes so far, and I think a very consistent message, I must actually add, here is the list of key priorities for IT teams and execs that we've just summarized, and this is a forecast for the next 6 months. So first of all, business and IT alignment. Again, truly transitioning from a PC shop to a value-adding technology partner for the business. Secondly, operational excellence. So fixing the basics and delivering a stable, optimal, efficient service that really adds value back to the organization. Thirdly, skills and capability management, understanding and really preparing for the IT organization of the future. So looking at the challenges, the business priorities, the expectations, and now lastly, what success would look like for IT, I think we can clearly see the issue at hand and the ever-growing gap between expectation and the ability of the IT organization to actually deliver. And that brings us all the way back to this growing issue of lacking skills and capabilities. So I think at this point, Marion, if we can get the audience involved again and maybe just run another poll.
Sounds good, Mariana. And I did have a question for you from Gary in the audience as well in the meantime. So before I go to the question, I will run the poll, and to remind everyone again, the last option will be Enterprise Solution Architecture, option F, which, if that is what you consider to be the domain that will have the largest skills gap in 2017, chat in, and I will tally in those answers as well. So, Mariana, well, the audience is answering the question. What question I received for you is regarding the skills you're focused, and also in general in the market, there's a big focus on the skills of the IT department, the IT team. But isn't there a growing need for the business skills? So, looking, I guess, at the business users and their ability to use technology and the services provided by IT. And how do you see that that side of the alignment?
Yeah, Marion, I think that's a very interesting question. Thank you, Gary. I think as we see this change in the IT organization, and as we see, I think, technology really becoming that integral part of the business, we definitely see a skills transfer or a renewed focus on where the actual skill need to sit. And I think that opens up questions around, so say for instance, if we look at being customer centric, as we've seen in most of these surveys that comes top to mind, I mean, if we think about being customer centric, where should the skill really sit? Is it within the IT organization or is it truly within the business? And then also, how do we bridge that gap? And I think bridging that gap between the business user and the actual provider of the service becomes increasingly complex when you now start using cloud-based solutions where you can't physically sometimes see your actual provider. So it's not like in traditional instances where you could run down to the IT department and actually have an informed discussion. And I think that just opens up this whole discussion around proper alignment between business and IT and where the strategy actually fits in. So I think there's definitely a renewed thinking, and we really need to start asking questions around where's the best place for our IT worker of the future. And in terms of the organizational structure, do they actually fit within an IT organization, or is it possible that the IT organization of the future is actually just part of the business? And I think that's actually an interesting move that we'll see. That being said, I think another key new skill that needs to be developed within IT organizations is this whole thing of how do I properly manage business expectations and how do I properly manage vendors or third parties or suppliers or the business. And I think that's a critical skill that we need to start actually focus some attention on around how do we develop a person that really understand that service delivery and performance is based on relationship management. And I think that's also a key area to focus on in future. And I know, Gary, just from answering that basically just asking the question, I know he's heavily involved also in business relationship management and what that entails. And I think you'll also have some interesting views on that. But I definitely see that there's a renewed focus on changing the way that we currently see structures, and also this new need for this person that actually understands how to deal with relationships, whether it's third parties, outsourced vendors, or the business. Okay. I hope that answers it.
I didn't get a request for clarification. I did have a couple more questions for you come in the meantime around policy, but do you want to close the poll first and save that for the end, maybe?
Yeah, let's do that. I'm just cognizant of time, so let's just maybe do that first.
Okay, so the poll results are, Mariana, why don't you? Can you see it there?
That's very, Yes, I can. I love seeing that cloud computing actually is on there. Very interesting that we that most of you actually, like 67%, expects the largest skills gap in cybersecurity. I think even looking at just the collaboration between big data, cloud, and security. I mean, if you think about the five forces that we keep on referring to, so cloud, cyber, big data, mobility, and social, the social world, I think it all creates a, almost like a bigger gap in terms of an individual that truly understands what this whole new world looks like. And I think, again, it might also be a reflection of the actual adoption. So I think cybersecurity is definitely top of mind, and it's part of traditional and non-traditional implementations. Whereas I think, especially in Africa, we are still in our infant shoes when it comes to cloud computing and big data. Although I think there's a massive hype around it, there's a massive need around it, and there's definitely, I think, a massive adoption that we'll see going forward, especially I think in 2017. So that was very interesting to see. I think, let me just see if I can get my controls back on the screen
Yes,
before we proceed. I don't know why let me just see if that goes over. Yes, there we go. I think what we also see is, and coming back to this whole thing around business expectation and this growing gap between what the IT teams currently deliver, so the business expectation versus the IT capability and the skills gap. I think this picture also just reiterate the initial statement around the business priorities of improved efficiencies, automation, innovation, the reduction of cost, the management of risk, and the ability of the IT organization to actually deliver against these expectations are, again, just highlighting this ever-growing skills and capability shortage that we see, especially in the emerging technology market. So I think the question in my mind is, so what now? What do we actually do to solve this problem? And I think we see tech-savvy organizations all asking the same questions. So how do we develop a unified digital strategy that incorporates this agile world and incorporates innovative new solutions? I think another question that comes to mind is, how do we really embrace change management? The other thing, again, and highlighting the poll answer actually, how do we maintain security and privacy given all these complexities and managing all these multiple projects? The other thing that comes to mind, especially with the adoption of cloud, is this whole question around, but how do we deal with shadow IT? And then also the question that always come back is, like, in terms of budgets and reducing costs, how do we actually deal with hiring people, new people, with the skills needed for all these new changes that's actually happening? So I think technology investments in cloud, analytics, and cyber are increasing, as they are all heavy contributors to the broader digital transformation agenda that we currently see. And I think all these things, cloud, analytics, cyber, all actually provide some answers to some degree to some of these key questions that we've just seen. So on the back of that, I thought, let's just quickly look at some of the stats surrounding cloud adoption. So based on a Computer World Forecast survey that was done on 182 IT professionals, they basically indicated that 29% of the survey respondents confirmed they've already moved to some enterprise application of cloud. 7% actually said that they moved mission critical systems, which I don't see currently in many instances happening in the African continent. And then, interesting enough, 20% of the respondents actually reported they're not moving to the cloud at all. that again raised a question in my mind as to how educated users are. In the past, I think we've experienced a number of people actually still struggling with fully grasping what cloud services really mean, even though they are actually using it on a daily basis. This is actually, I think, also supported by a CompTIA State of the Cloud 2015 report showing that up to 40% of IT professionals can't differentiate between public and private cloud, which is actually a very interesting stat. I just thought to bring it back home, and IT Web and Puleng actually ran a shadow IT survey in the beginning of this year, and interesting enough here to see that 39% of organizations reported that they're moving with caution when it comes to cloud adoption. And I think this is actually so in line with what we've seen in our first poll in the beginning of the session. It is interesting though that about 70%, if you add the moving with caution and the full steam ahead, actually did report on moving into the adopting some cloud solutions. When we look at the current cloud market, a recent Gartner report projected that it will grow significantly to like 204 billion in the next year. That is predicted growth rates of between 16% and 25% for things, for instance, like cloud management and security services. The IDC also indicated that hybrid cloud is predicting to be the go-to deployment model, which in the one end is a good thing, but at the other end just add more complexities to our already very complex IT environments. I think that's also, again, similar in the South African market. We see that 74% of participants indicated the uptake of software as a service solutions, especially over the next 2 years. What we've seen from a number of discussions around cloud adoption in South Africa specifically is this strong growth can basically be attributed to, I think, a shift away from legacy IT. A lot of companies still sit with a lot of legacy and a lot of IT debt going together with legacy IT. Organizations really starting to pursue this whole digital business strategy. An interesting thing and a good thing is that IT budgets are actually growing. There's some level of a reduction in complexity or a thinking around that cloud adoption would actually help to reduce complexity across IT stacks. There's also this need for agility. So cloud solutions really enabling the business to move faster, and then this whole thing around vendor cloud services becoming more and more mature. So I think just let's move on to what the stats actually indicate around some of the greatest adoption challenges, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but interesting here is to see that still security and privacy are still high on all of the charts. I think some of the things that's actually losing some grounds now is the losing control, vendor immaturity, lack of organizational readiness, and so forth. We also see, interesting enough, in the RightScale 2016 state report, that where it actually lists the lack of resources and expertise as the #1 barrier to cloud adoption, and again followed by security. But you will notice a great correlation between budgets and costs, security, and then also addressing this hiring and the skills gaps that we've been talking about. So again, looking at the South African market, we see that security remains top of mind, followed by the integration of complexities and compliance. And then 32% of the respondents also indicated the lack of skilled staff as a major contributor and a major barrier to cloud adoption in South Africa. So what are some of the key takeaways from the stats that we've just looked at? So firstly, I think we can expect to see an increased spending on security and cloud, especially going forward in 2017. Secondly, Governance, risk, compliance, and regulation is still important, very, very important, and top of the discussion agenda. So it's important for organizations to actually devise a strategy around governance, risk, and management. And then thirdly, and again, just talking about the thread that we've been talking about in this webinar, is this large need for cloud computing skills and this gap in the market when it comes to emerging technologies. So what are we actually essentially saying? I think over 90% of IT professionals use cloud, yet there's this massive lack of cloud expertise, and that's a really big concern for organization. The cloud market is definitely growing. The demand for cloud skills is definitely growing. Yet, I think the gap and the scarcity of cloud computing skills are actually widening. So, looking back and also looking into the future, I think there's no doubt that there will be massive investments in cloud skills and to just reducing this gap that we see, whether I think you're a business executive, a project manager, a CIO, IT director, or even just in business, I think there's this need to actually produce return on investment when it comes to IT investments. So where to from here? I think it's critical to ensure that our organizations have the appropriate mix of skills to execute the intended strategy. So really coming to that place where we have proper alignment between business needs and IT delivery. I think it's critical to build the right set of skills and capabilities in your IT organization to really enhance not only their own competencies, but to really develop relationships with other executives and really develop relationships with the business to really find the right talent to drive business value. I think sourcing, vendor management, and leveraging suppliers and partners are a core capability that's essential to the success of future IT organizations. There needs to be planning for investment in digital capabilities, especially around this whole focus of customer-focused digital agenda. And then lastly, I think on this journey to IT operator and from being an IT operator or a cost center to being a trusted value-adding business partner, we need to think strategically around talent and to motivate why the existing staff or our existing IT teams need to change focus from being only operational to really be excellent in business transformation. So in a recent report by Accenture, over half of the survey participants actually indicated that our IT team is not educated or skilled in cloud technology. I think as things stand today in the ever-changing digital market, the skills gap is preventing some organizations from actually evolving and evolving as fast as they actually need to. Technology is changing, I think, at a massive, massive change, and the problem, I think, is actually augmented for African businesses, where there's an absolute scarcity of technology skills in, I think, most of the African countries. So it's critical for us to consider a portfolio that supports the strategic intent of the IT organization, where there's deliberate intent and action to manage talent strategies, to really understand the skills and the capabilities that you currently have, whether these skills whether you need to actually maintain or enhance the skills, whether you need to retrain, whether you need to redeploy, or whether you basically need to go out in the market and search for additional skills. The right skills for professional level cloud computing, I think, really involves both technical and business perspective. So newer skills are needed to fill the skills gap. IT organizations need to introduce entirely new roles that actually, I think, do not actually exist as we stand today. And there's a massive need for a new workforce that is dynamic, that is agile, and that really are capable in terms of delivering on the much needed business needs. So I think it's imperative to drive internal agendas for training people continuously in new technologies. And I know we are running out of time very, very quickly, but I just quickly want to leave you with just very quickly, some practical steps to close the cloud skills and capability gap. So I think effective IT talent and workforce management is more than just a skills assessment. It is really a complete set of people-related processes that actually ensures that the organization can maximize their capability and their resources. I think it's essential for us to understand how to keep high-performing, high-potential IT talent, to really think about how do we attract best talent to our organization, to think about the most important considerations, especially when we have a global and diverse workforce, to think about the capabilities of the future IT organization, and to really come up with the best workforce mix to deliver against our business priorities. So having said all of that, I think my view is that African professionals are really ready to differentiate themselves and to add that competitive edge to their careers. Cloud computing is fastly becoming a driver for efficiency, productivity, and differentiation. I think we will see a new demand and uptake of cloud capabilities in the near future, and we need to really start leveraging the power of cloud solutions and services, and really need to start thinking around the right level of skills to close the gap that we see in terms of emerging technologies. So in terms of a solution, we really believe the combination is firstly to understand the current the current reality. So to identify the gaps and the weaknesses, and to develop the skills and capability that is needed for this transformation. And then secondly, to be deliberately training the existing skill force. Workforce. So I think the best way of dealing with the first suggestion is to do a cloud skills and capability assessment. And the aim of the assessment is really just to review and analyze the relevant cloud skills and capabilities across the relevant business and operational units, to identify the gaps, and then to ultimately come out with a skills and capability matrix, a training program, and aligned talent strategy. And then I think secondly, very intentionally dealing with a strategy to upskill and train the existing workforce. And that, I think, is where we are very proud to be associated with the Cloud Credential Council, where we can offer a comprehensive solution around cloud certification and training that includes cloud technology associate training, solution architecture, cloud administrators, cloud developers, cloud service management, cloud security managers, and we are also working with the University of Pretoria to develop, I think, an industry-first cloud auditing course. So you can hop onto our website where you can find more details on all of these courses and the training dates and so forth. So I think just in conclusion, so organizations are really, I think, more than ever willing and able and interested in taking advantage of the efficiency that cloud actually offers. In fact, I really believe that cloud solutions provide a means of combating the technical resource constraints, especially in Africa. And I think it's a really big accelerator to becoming that trusted, value-adding business partner that we've been speaking about during this webinar. I think the scarcity of technical talent is a significant concern across many industries, but I hope that this discussion has actually provided you with some ideas to address these challenges, and hopefully also some next steps in terms of cultivating and investing in building this IT organization or workforce or team of the future. So I think what an honor and an absolute privilege it has been to just spend some time with you on this webinar. I really hope to connect with you soon, either around our cloud skills and capability assessments, or I hope to welcome you at one of our cloud training courses in 2017. So again, apologies for running over time. Marion, I don't know if we should maybe just email our responses to some of the questions back to the audience, or what do you think?
Well, we can always send the recording via email afterwards, and if anyone in the audience has to run, we completely understand, and thank you for the time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mariana, as well. Very insightful presentation. We only have, I think, about 3 questions in the pipeline. So would that be okay for your time, Mariana, to answer them now? And we can include it in the recording for anyone who
That's
cannot attend.
that, that's perfect. Let's go for it.
Perfect. So before we move on, earlier you were talking about the business skills, and we had a comment from Louise who was just pointing out that um, the skills regarding IT versus business, who needs reskilling, should actually be shared through multidisciplinary teams that are focused on the common client-centric objectives of the organization. Um,
I love that. I love that comment actually, because I mean it brings us back to this whole thing around proper business and IT alignment and actually moving away, I think, to the organization of the future where we don't have this like diverse two-legged organization where you have IT that's down in the basement and you have business, but it's where IT is really becoming the heartbeat of business and really becoming part of the team, almost like one holistic team. So I absolutely agree with that, and I hope that we can start working towards those type of collaboration and just shared interests. Because I think the conversation also then changes from um, being technology focused or being technology led and technology enabled to a discussion around let's focus around our data. How can we actually utilize our data to the best of what we have in our resource pool and capability pool to actually come to insightful conclusions? And I mean, that then becomes a very powerful discussion. Plus, I think that creates that alignment immediately without it being forced through structures or mandates, for that matter.
Very good point. And moving on to the next question from Fo, who's a scholar doing research in cloud computing and policy. So this is focused more on the policy side. The first question is about the gap in policies. Um, so what is your opinion on the gap with regard to the policies of around emerging technologies?
So I think in terms of best practices and standards, there's like actually many organizations that are currently working on establishing standards and developing, I think, specific policies. And I mean, that's been a discussion since 2010, I think, and it was high on the agenda between 2010 and 2014, where they really tried to push for cloud-specific standards and cloud-specific frameworks. But I think that, in my mind, and this is my opinion, but I think the discussion actually has changed. It's around data management and it's around understanding where your data actually sits from the initiation up until destruction. So if you think about a data discussion rather than a technology or an infrastructure discussion or a cloud discussion for that matter, we do have policies and we do have some standards that could cover that. I mean, from a South African perspective, I think some of the key things that we'll see a change, especially when it comes to regulation and building policies, is around the PPI Act, so the Protection of Personal Information, which will enforce some level of standard and setting some policy level. But ultimately, I mean, companies and management is still responsible to ensure that they protect their assets. Information ultimately is the biggest asset of the organization. So again, for me, it almost comes back to do we try and build policies and do we try and build standards for new emerging technologies, or do we actually focus where the biggest value lies? And that goes back to data and almost a discussion around setting policies and adequately managing data for the organization.
Thank you, Mariana. And elaborating also, and you touched on it already, the PPI Act in South Africa. Do you think the national ICT policies are sufficient to deal with these issues? And within that, is it an enabler for cloud computing by addressing these issues, or rather an impediment to cloud adoption and growth in their region?
So I think interesting enough, obviously when there's policy enforcement, it creates a sense of trust. So from that perspective, I actually believe that policies and adequate security and governance enhance adoption. Because once you are able to trust in a provider or a solution based on specific I think standards and regulation, that does create a level of I think maturity in terms of adoption. So that's my one view. On the other end, I think the PPI Act has actually hindered some of the adoption of cloud, especially if you think about having most of the cloud providers having their data centers US based. So for instance, the PPI Act would state that if you are hosting your data offshore, the company, well, the country where you're actually hosting it needs to have a similar privacy law in place. Now, for us, it's good from a South African perspective to then host some of our data in the European countries, because they have the European Privacy Act, which is similar to the PPI Act, which makes it easier. But from a US-based cloud provider perspective, it does create some gaps. So, for instance, you would then have to have transparency in terms of the controls that the cloud provider would have, and there might just be some hindrance, I think, or barriers when it comes to that. I do, however, also think that we are moving to a more globalized type environment, to a more globalized society, and I do think, well, not in the probably in the next 5 or 10 years, but definitely beyond, I think, will see that ultimately it becomes one playing ground. But yeah, so from that perspective, maybe just to summarize, I think there's ways and means. We can still look at European-based cloud providers. It becomes a bit more tricky when it's US-based. But again, coming back to the ultimate discussion around data and understanding what type of information you are sending offshore when you are considering cloud providers.
Okay, and thank you, and thank you also from the audience who seem happy with all the answers today. I did have one last question, and this one's actually for me because I'm just curious. But with cloud, the one thing I always imagine, and I'm a layman, in a bit, is that you need to be online, you need to be connected. So for parts of Africa where connectivity is still an issue, there is, a limitation with using cloud services. But then they're also missing out on the benefits, having that infrastructure as well as the support of the cloud service provider. Do you foresee any other stopgap measures, or is that really a deal breaker of a issue for cloud adoption?
Yeah, so I think that's probably the biggest the factor in terms of the slower and the lower cloud adoption when you look at the African continent. So definitely, I mean, the first thing is the connectivity. So actually having a connection, number one, and sometimes there's just no internet cable in the ground, and then you obviously can't even go that route. But again, most organizations are situated in the bigger cities, and most of those cities are connected at this point. So it's really when you start thinking about really, really small organizations that would be in the rural areas where connectivity is a massive issue. I think the other thing is just around the exchange rate and the cost of connectivity. So what we find in the African continent, because we are charged in US dollars, the exchange rate at this point, and the weaker rand and the weakened African currencies are hurting us a little bit in terms of the cost. So it's always an interesting discussion around whether cloud really provides cost reductions and cost efficiencies, especially given that connectivity for us is expensive, plus then incorporating the exchange rate. But I mean, I think as we are progressing into a more connected world, I'm truly looking forward to a stage where more places in Africa and more of the rural areas in Africa also have the ability to actually connect and make use of these services. Because I think, especially for the smaller organizations, and we see a lot of innovation and a lot of smaller startups in the African continent, I think they can benefit so much from cloud-based solutions. So hopefully we can all work together to get us to a place where we are connected, and where cloud services really becomes a utility, where it's more affordable, especially I think for smaller organizations.
Yeah, that's very true. And thank you for that, Mariana. I think I definitely agree. I would love to see the world get there and be more connected. So I would think we can close it on that note. We do have a few extra resources from Mariana and Mariana Carroll Consulting, the Unpacking Cloud Computing ebook, as well as their 2017 training calendar is available on the website. So please do go on over there and check that out. And from the CCC, thank you again for your attention. Thank you, Mariana, also for the collaboration today. And yeah, so visit our website. You can see all our previous webinars. We will send you an email when the recording for this session is online as well. And browse the website to get a better idea about the CCC, what we do, our partners, and the training there. Thank you again, everybody. Have a good day. And
Thank you, Marianne.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.